After trying out the eShop demos of several Etrian Odyssey games, I eventually got to play Millennium Girl, which ended up being one of my favorite 3DS games. However, I ended up wanting more. When its price dropped, I made sure to pick up Fafnir Knight to see if it really was an improvement. Like how Millennium Girl is a remake of the first Etrian Odyssey game, the Fafnir Knight is a remake of the second Etrian Odyssey game, Etrian Odyssey 2: Legends of Lagaard. If you're not familiar, Etrian Odyssey is a series that involves exploring dungeons and drawing maps as you go through them to keep track of items and, well, where you are. Like Millennium Girl, Fafnir Knight opens up with a cutscene along with a Japanese song. I sometimes found myself just sitting through this so I could listen to the song, like I'm doing right now. Also, it's also the only real cutscene in the game. The other quote-unquote cutscenes are just a few animated images where the characters blink. Like the previous game, you can choose if you want to play story mode or in the classic Etrian Odyssey style. Since I'm more interested in story mode, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Story mode begins with a couple of orphans named Flavio and the guy you're playing as who you can name, and they were taken in by the Midgard library. The two of them ended up becoming best friends as they grew up in Midgard, depending on each other during their training and education. When they were still young, they met the Duke of Caledonia's daughter, Ariana, and they all became friends and often played outdoors together. When they got older, Ariana would have to perform a ritual that takes place every century in an unknown ruin. She is escorted by Flavio and the protagonist to the town of Lagaard. They begin by exploring the forest after accepting tasks from the Duke's palace. Along the way, they end up meeting Bertrand and Chloe, a couple of people who were sent to investigate the same ruins that Ariana and the guys had to go to. Inunga Gap. I think. Those two end up joining the team, and they all explore the Labyrinth together. What's interesting about the Labyrinth this time around is you move upwards rather than deeper into the earth. It's a small detail, but I do find it interesting. Like I said earlier, in the Labyrinth, you'll draw the maps as you go through each floor. You can even adjust how you map. I like to play with Auto Map, which will automatically map in the walls and floor as you walk, but doesn't overdo it because you'll still have to place the other stuff like chests and gathering points. In the Labyrinth, there are multiple paths to take, which can take you to special areas or items. There are also alternate sets of staircases on certain floors. When you walk through the Labyrinth, every now and then you'll get into a battle. They come up randomly, but there's a little meter on the corner of your screen that will tell you how close you are to getting into a battle. If it's blue, you're good for a little while, but when it gets closer to red, you need to prepare for a fight. Battles have a lot of the same moves as Millennium Girl did. You have a basic attack option, you can use skills that use up TP, defend yourself, use different items, change the position of your party, escape, or use Force, which works differently from the previous game's boost mechanic. Force gives you a couple special moves to use. At first you can only activate one of them, which starts at Force, and it only lasts a few turns. If you use the other special move, it will put you out of the state regardless of how many turns it's been used. If you're playing as a Fafnir Knight, a lot of your opponents will likely be screwed. At the end of a battle, you'll level up and collect any items if your enemies dropped any. What's cool about items is they are more organized, and Grimoire stones are counted separately rather than just lumping everything together. There are other enemies on the map you'll have to look around for known as foes. Depending on what they are, they'll move around in a certain part until, in most cases, they notice you. When they notice you, they'll come after you until you're too far. If you're not careful, you could end up trapped, like I got in the first game one time. Anytime in the Labyrinth, with the exception of battles, a menu can be opened with the Y button. Here you can view your items, use certain skills that aren't restricted to battles, view the status of party members, equip or unequip certain items, spend points earned by leveling up on certain moves, organize your party, or look at recorded information such as important quests from the Duke's Palace, side quests from the bar, your guild card, information on every enemy you fought, and information on every item you've collected. For the most part, it's a lot of stuff that you could do in Millennium Girl. Towns are not too much different either. The places you can go offer the same functions but have different features. There's an inn where you can rest until the morning or next night. In story mode, you get these extra scenes where members of your party want to talk to you before you go to bed. You can also heal those who have had their HP drained all the way. The only other real difference here is that you can choose who you want at the front desk, after clearing a certain side quest. It wasn't necessary to do this, but I appreciate the extra effort to give us the option. Next is the shop where you can buy and sell items. Then there's a restaurant. At the restaurant, you can make dishes with ingredients from the Labyrinth, either from the monsters you fight or gathering points. After a certain point in the game, you can spend money on developing town and advertising food served at the restaurant. It's a nice distraction, I'll admit. I love seeing the characters interact every time the chef, Regina, made something new for them. The first game didn't have anything like this, but what the first game did have was a guild house, which can be accessed from this restaurant. Here you can equip and trade grimoire stones. Equipping these will give your characters different moves to use, even if it's not something that their class would typically have. Leveling up to certain levels will allow you to equip more of them and only works to a certain point. Honestly, the grimoire system feels a bit more clear and is a lot easier to use this time around. You can also have Regina store items for you. You can view your guild card as well. You can get more by street passing or scanning QR codes. Not really sure what the point of the feature is, but whatever. Then there's data settings where you can scan QR codes, turn street pass on or off, or invite your guild from Millennium Girl over. It only works if you've generated extra data in that game previously. If you do this, explorers from your Millennium Girl guild will come to trade grimoires every so often. The next place in town is the bar where you accept quests that I mentioned earlier. You can also get information from other people in the bar. You might find advice or just some extra dialogue that's not really that important. I really only use this feature during some of the side quests which require you to talk to someone in the bar. There's also the Explorers Guild where you can organize your guild. This is where you register them too. You can even change your character's class to train them, however these will cost you. Whichever character you're working on will lose levels. Losing levels seems a bit too high a price for me, so I never took advantage of it. If you're playing in story mode, a lot of these features aren't really available, and since what was available required levels to drop, it just felt pretty useless to me. In classic mode, you can rename your adventurers, have them leave the guild, reset their skill points while dropping a couple levels, and you can even retire them. Then there's the Duke's Palace where you accept missions. There's not really much else to say about it. Lastly is the forest entrance where you enter the labyrinth or the ruins after you've unlocked them. You choose where you want to go and pick any floor that you activated a geomagnetic pull on. These are used to teleport between the labyrinth and town. In Millennium Girl, the extra labyrinth, Gladsheim, was only available in story mode. However, in Fafnir Knight, you can get it in classic mode by accepting a quest from the bar. So that's nice. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this game like I did with the first game. I enjoyed exploring and working on the maps. I love seeing the characters interact when there was dialogue. I also liked some of the extra details that were added. In town, if you sit still for too long, whoever's there will start talking. In the labyrinth, members of your party will start talking if you go too long without moving. A lot of the changes I loved, and some I found a bit odd. For example, there were areas in Millennium Girl that completely filled your HP and TP. They aren't present in Fafnir Knight. It's not a big deal, it just feels a bit weird. Despite that, map design is for the most part actually done a lot better this time. It also helps that a lot of this labyrinth's themes are far more appealing. Only one real issue with the map design: several areas are locked behind a paywall. I can understand adding an entire new floor or just a simple boss fight to a floor you've been on, but why not let those other areas of the labyrinth be a part of the main game? This game was originally $50 when it came out, and honestly, I don't feel like its original price tag is justified at all. Fafnir Knight took me far less time to complete than Millennium Girl, which was over 50 hours. I got this one done in just over 30. If this paywall wasn't a thing, I probably would be okay with the original price tag. However, I would have been able to accept $40 like most 3DS games have been. The game's price got dropped to $20 along with a few other Etrian Odyssey games, so I can't really complain about the current price at all. Despite some of these issues, Fafnir Knight, much like its predecessor, was a very enjoyable game that I didn't want to put down. There were parts that required grinding, but I didn't let that ruin my experience. It helped that the game had a story that often made me want to know what happened next. Unfortunately, this game's story, while not bad, doesn't feel like as much thought went into it as Millennium Girl's. Further in the game though, there were several twists that really surprised me. Fafnir Knight is definitely one of my favorite 3DS games now. It has a lot of changes the Untold series needed, like multiple save files. Not sure why it took this long for them to realize that multiple save files would be useful, but thanks! An updated UI that actually displays names when characters talk, a more organized inventory, more detailed map system, and more. I'd recommend this to anyone that likes dungeon crawlers or RPGs in general. You don't even have to play the first Untold to understand what's going on, because it has a different set of characters. I would definitely play a third Etrian Odyssey Untold game if it were to exist at one point.